Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Wherever you are in the world, this is Grant Cameron, and I'm with my assistant, Nicole Sackage. And we're just going to do a little chit chat tonight.
Chit
We're going to
chat.
be like the latest Bledsoe podcast, where we're just going to sort of talk back and forth and laugh and go wow and just talk about a couple of things that have happened. You and I have followed a lot of the controversy with TTSA, with Richard Doty, with all this government. People figure there's going to be government disclosure and this sort of stuff. And there's been a couple of interviews that were released that we're going to talk about the one tonight, and maybe tomorrow or Sunday we'll talk about the other one. The one we'll talk about tonight is an interview that's just done with Jim Semivan and with Tom DeLonge. Now, I wrote a book called Managing Magic, and in there I refer to Tom DeLonge as one of the five messiahs, and that he did have a very key part to the whole setting up what's going on now, the disclosure thing, where he sets up in 2015. And in the interview that was aired last night, he and Jim Semivan get on there and they talk. So I want to talk to you, get your opinion on what you thought was significant in this interview, because we've been following them, and I think you and I have a little bit of an insight, because Jim Semivan has not talked to anybody in the UFO community or anybody done any interviews except for Melinda Leslie.
Right.
And you and I are friends with Melinda, and we got her on the panels to tell the story about what Jim was saying. And maybe it's nobody took Jim serious or Melinda seriously about what Jim was telling. And now Jim's gone on this other show with this Keating guy.
Yep.
And now suddenly everybody's all excited about Jim Semivan. But Jim Semivan's been talking indirectly to us for 3 years now.
Yep.
And so you watched the interview with Tom DeLonge. Maybe give a little synopsis for people of who did the interview and what this was all about. It was streamed live.
This was Dr. Keating's podcast, and I think it's just called Dr. Keating. I could look it up real quick, but I think it's interesting because, he's an astronomer in a heavy scientific background, well respected in the field. And all of a sudden he's kind of started this podcast, and he's interested in kind of this fringe science and where it could lead physics. And it seems like he's got all these behind the scenes connections, and it's really a good show for being a young show. And the people who collaborate with him also have some podcasts. Like, I'm drawing a blank on his name, but his podcast is called The Theory of Everything. And I follow both of them. They have a great back and forth. But so Dr. Keating has kind of made news in our community because of Avi Loeb's Galileo project. And Dr. Keating has just joined that project as well. So it's kind of like we've been begging for these scientists to come into the community, and now they kind of are. So I think it's a good thing to have people like DeLonge and Semivan talking on shows like this, even though they haven't spoken to our community directly yet, or us on our panel discussions. But we have had Melinda, and I'll throw in just my one little dig. Jim Semivan and Melinda, or Melinda talking about Jim Semivan on our panel discussion, has been the one and only edit that I've ever made. Wow. To one of my recordings. And that's when we were having our disclosure discussion, and lo and behold, Jim Semivan called Melinda in the middle of our panel, and she flashed her phone, and I edited it out so nobody could get his home phone number. But that was proof in of itself, just to a lot of people, they were like, oh, he's actually, yep, she's on the phone with him during the panel. Like, it was so funny. So,
and he's a key guy. One thing I'd like to bring up to start here is you and I follow you followed it more than me, the Twitterverse, where there's all this infighting and stuff like that. And it's like, what happened to TTSA? They've all fallen apart, they're all collapsed, and everybody's deserted them. And did you get the impression with me that no, it didn't seem like much had fallen apart, where he said there's more people than they can handle. All these government people want to join them, and they haven't got room for them. And so to me, I think that was one of the things that immediately stood out to me was everybody thinks TTSA is in total disarray. It's collapsed. There's nothing left of it. And when you see Jim Semivan and him talking, it's like, no, they're still going ahead and everything's going just fine.
I think, I don't know if everybody's maybe tired of the excuse of COVID, but TTSA is a business and it did affect a small business. I mean, it's ties, it's linked, and they explained that tonight in the interview very well. I think, their work with the Army, there's only X amount of funding. Anytime things get moved around, this is a back burner funded thing. So they're kind of waitlisted right now. But what they had in place was the merchandise and the books and the entertainment side. So they're going to push forward with that. And it sounds like they'll be back in the game as soon as we all reach that new normal. It doesn't sound to me like they're pulling back in any way. It sounds to me like they've kind of been riding out this wave like every other business has. So,
yeah.
And
the other thing that they pointed out was the separation of Elizondo and Mellon, where everybody says, oh, they ditched him, Tom DeLonge, they took off. And both of them were very cordial to the fact that they wanted to do other things. And that's sort of the story that Elizondo was told, is he wasn't into entertainment. And because of COVID, I think DeLonge pointed out, they couldn't do everything at the same time. So you can't, be building flying saucers and doing the stuff. So they had already had the film stuff going. So they decided to go with the film stuff, and that Elizondo had left to do other things, which is his version of the story, which is different than the Twitterverse. The Twitterverse, it's like they abandoned this thing, and Tom DeLonge went down in flames, and this sort of stuff. And I think to me, I was very impressed with the interview in terms of what they say. Were you impressed with the thing?
Because was, I mean, and I think this is like the big thing in the Twitterverse. It's like so much is taken out of context, or only one little blurb of something is shared. So it was nice to hear Tom DeLonge be able to speak in sort of a long format form, not somebody quoting him, this was straight from his mouth. And he got to say those little nuances like, these are my personal thoughts. I'm not speaking for TTSA, which, it's like he's almost trained to know, like, if he doesn't say things like that, that's what's going to be controversial, or that's what the Twitterverse will go crazy about, which, I mean, it's a double-edged sword. We love the Twitterverse because they're so excited and they're hanging on every word. And then we hate the Twitterverse because it's so ruthless.
Yeah. They sort of fill in the blanks all the time. When something happens in TTSA, they just know that DeLonge and Mellon left, and you make up the rest. So there's 20 different versions of what happened.
There were, I think we all kind of had our speculations and our guesses as to what was going on. But and I think one thing he mentioned that we all kind of deduced ourselves was Chris Mellon is moving to what he does best, and that's speaking with people inside the government, using his contacts. Like, we've alluded that he was going to go back or really start hitting that hard again. And that was kind of confirmed to me by like what DeLonge said in this interview, the same, I liked the part in the interview too. Like, I know we've had these discussions before about, and you really have dove deep on this, about how Tom got the connections that he did. And the way he explained it kind of has followed suit with how I've heard you lay it out there before too. It's like he had these connections, and then they were like, you need to meet this guy. And then he talked about that tonight, or in the podcast. So it was interesting.
And Jim did point out how he found out about DeLonge, which is the version I told. Was I think it was Kit Green mentioned to him, hey, there's this DeLonge guy. Have you ever heard of him? No, I never heard of the guy. And he's got something going, and he's talking to some people. And then he didn't mention the number, but I think the story was that it happened in San Diego at a hotel, where Tom DeLonge was held up in this hotel for 2 days. and Jim Semivan and 5 other agents quizzed him. Like, who are you talking to? Why are they telling you this sort of stuff? And Semivan actually tells the story without getting into the fact of the hotel room.
Yeah.
And there were 6 of these agents. He said,
He
we
said
went and we
he
talked
did
to him,
say
and
it.
then they offered to help. Okay, we can help you,
Mhm.
because they realized that he had some sort of connection and the government was dealing with him, some people in the government. And they mentioned, the thing that he mentioned was there was no classified information. So that's what happened in
Said
2016.
there
Tom
was
DeLonge
there was
brings out
no
his first book, and
he felt
according to
confident.
Semivan, there was no classified material in that book.
Yeah, and then he slid it right in there at the very end. He said there was no classified information in the book or that was leaked to him. And then he was like, but he was right on the money or right on the nose. Like, he said it like real fast. And I was like, ooh, note that time. I got to go back and look at that to get a direct quote. But yeah, he did say, but he was right on the money. And it's like, on which part though? Like.
Well, when you find that, send me the quote. I'll put it up, because I'm putting up a lot of Jim Semivan's quotes on
Well,
the.
and I don't know if a lot of people that are kind of new to this, I don't think they really realize that Tom's book, Secret Machines, was out before TTSA. It wasn't like TTSA and then Tom wrote this book. Like the book was there first. That was like his manifesto,
Yeah,
and
the stuff he was being told. That was April of 2016. So it was about a year and a half before TTSA. And that's when Jim Semivan joins him in 2016 and writes the foreword to the book.
yeah,
And that was the whole deal, was when this book came out, everybody in the government said, what's going on here? It's like, this guy's talking to these high level people, and all the intelligence people pick it up, and they want to contact Tom because they're trying to figure out who you're talking to, because they're trying to figure it out as well. It was pretty interesting. And it's sort of, as you pointed out, I think it sort of fits the scenario that I built, where
yeah.
people think, that Tom built this whole thing himself. And no, he had these people come to him and offer to help him and send him to other places and stuff. And he handled it well. I give Tom credit
Yeah.
that he worked it very well in terms of moving the thing along and financing it and this sort of stuff. But
Well, and I don't know, I think in our Wilson document discussions and those moments, well, man, that's almost a year and a half ago now. But in those talks, when we discussed how, 20 years ago, this brought to light some things that Greer had talked about back in the day, I'm starting to look at Tom DeLonge more in that light. It's like, the last few years, it's been so back and forth. And this is just my personal back and forth, I'm not anti anything that he says, curious observer at this point. But I almost wonder, like the more we hear him speak like this, backed up with people like Semivan, if we're going to have these aha moments, like we did a little bit, I just hope it doesn't have that big gap, like with the will documents and Greer. I don't want it to be 20 years. I would rather it be like sooner, and we can just go, yeah, okay, some of these things, Tom is saying is on the money. Or it would be nice to have that, to just have faith in TTSA too. Like, they're a good entity. They are moving this ball. There's just so much negative associated with our pillar foundations, I guess you could say, like MUFON. Everybody's back and forth on MUFON. Do you join? Do you not join? Do you participate? Do you not? Like, the argument's endless. And I don't want TTSA to turn into that. I would rather both of them be like the go-to, like they were 20 years ago. It's like ufology, turn to MUFON, turn to TTSA. Like, we don't have to turn to the government. Like, they
I
haven't
think
set up a task force hotline for the American public yet.
Yeah, I think TTSA has gone the way of MUFON, where there's people who are just not going to accept it anymore. They just
Right.
think it's a bad thing. But I think what we pointed out just before we started was the fact that when you see Tom DeLonge in a situation where his kids are running around in the background and he doesn't sound crazy, he's not saying stupid things, he's talking about my opinion. You see him in a whole different light. That he's just some guy who got
Mhm.
very interested. And he even said, I've made some mistakes,
Right.
and I've learned from Jim Semivan. It's sort of like Jim's telling him, don't say this, say this, how to handle it, because he was sort of talking off his, uh, you know,
Well, I mean, there's times for wild speculation and
yeah,
then there's not. Like, what do we laugh about? It's like you save the wild speculation for after the conferences, after the
yeah,
lectures at conferences,
yeah, yeah.
that's when you do that. And I don't know. It's just, it's got to be hard, I mean, I don't think I'm anywhere in the limelight and that kind of level, but you do have to watch what you say publicly. And I mean, that's why I like this like high strangeness side of ufology, because you don't always have to like preface it with, I'm skeptical in so many ways that I'm not
Yeah.
just going to be spoon fed anything, and that's what I think DeLong has realized, that he does have to guard that mouth because it will be just picked apart and taken out of context. So, and that's, I think, the biggest fault with Twitter. It's not that it is a great way to connect, but being so limited to whatever, how many characters or how many words you could
Yeah.
use, that's just, doesn't that kill any conversation? It's like, okay, well, you can't add to this conversation with body language or any
Yeah.
means of communication, so you got to limit it. Like, no.
That's why I use those little, I put it on into a PowerPoint slide, and then I pull that so I can make
Yeah.
it as long as I want. And a question, did you talk to Melinda about this? And have
I have
are
not.
we gonna,
I've been, I just told you I have a few days off in a row, and that's when I was going to start making phone calls, because my hours have been so crazy. But Melinda's been on my list because I know that I could just hear her, like, watching the interview. Honestly, I could hear her like say, yes, yes, or I'm glad he talked about that, or Jim, bring this up, and
well, maybe we can do it tomorrow. If you're gonna do the call to tomorrow or Sunday, we'll
I'll see
tape
what
it.
she has to say, because I would like to get her
Yeah.
feedback,
And
because I liked how Semivan talked about the release of the report and how it is setting things up. And that has kind of, I mean, it was directly on par with what Melinda has shared with our panel discussions about how these things take time. This will be like preliminary, no threat, no threat, no threat. He
yeah,
did
that was
that
significant
a
when he said
lot.
there was no threat, because Tom, you see the intro
Mhm.
where the guy actually mentions that Tom believes in the threat. And so Semivan said it quite clearly. I don't think they could care less about us.
Right. And
I don't believe it's a threat.
I think Tom really kind of cleared that up a little bit too, because he did say, well, what was it? It was something along the lines of, we don't know the intent. So you can like wildly speculate on all these horrible or good things. So I think he was trying to dial back the threat talk a little bit, but I don't know. That's all, that's like the 50-50 split right now. It's like, is it a threat? Is it not a threat? That's everybody's hot
But
topic.
it's significant. That's the fifth time Semivan has said that.
It is.
We don't
And
consider
I
this to
think
be a
the
threat.
other significant thing he said, which I believe that was one of the quotes you pulled and
Yeah.
posted, was, I've been in, this is what I
Intel.
career. It is not the Russians. It's not the Chinese. It's not our tech.
Yeah,
And
it's
then
just not. He said, yeah, it's just not. And
well, what did he say? He said the term I used in another podcast, I think he said earlier, was non-human
yeah,
controlled, or, so.
and he even mentioned that in terms of the UAP report, he
Mhm.
said when they stuck that in, they had to stick it in. It was like garbage. I mean, and
Yeah,
he even criticized the report, knowing, because he knows how these reports are written, that
right.
they had to stick that in there for whatever political reason or whatever. So he was a little bit critical of the report,
Mhm.
but you could tell that he was pretty honest about what he was saying. And a lot of times when Semivan was talking, like they asked him about Skinwalker Ranch, and he
Yeah.
said, "I don't know any more than you do." So he was basically saying a lot of times, "I have no idea. I have no idea. I don't know everything."
which falls in line with some of the things we've speculated, like so many people think the government has all the answers, but
Yeah.
like, I know it comes up when we talk about craft retrievals a lot, okay, if they do have a chunk of a craft or part of a craft, or if they've dug one up of archaeological site, or these pieces that get flung off, anytime you hear that they've worked on it, there's also that, well, we didn't figure it out, so we threw it back in the hanger one, or what are we calling it? Put it back in the shelf. Did it come out that it's like at Bass's structure in Las Vegas? Like, has that come out recently? They're like, why would this stuff be at Bass? Like, when anybody could walk up to it. It's like, I don't know. Do strangers often walk into businesses when they're not supposed to? Like, I just thought that seemed weird. It's like, maybe if it's Grant Cameron trying to take pictures of the jump room building.
Yeah, exactly. But he did mention the one question he avoided, of course, which was what? The Semivan, the one with the body.
Yes. Yeah.
He wouldn't go there, but otherwise he seemed pretty open about he didn't really evade any questions. He basically, if he didn't know, he said he didn't know, and he was pretty optimistic about what he thinks, that he's involved in this thing. He's very interested in it. He didn't deny it. I was really impressed with Jim Semivan. I came across very honestly. Or the main thing I think he mentioned, and this was this whole deal about the disinformation.
Yeah.
To tell people what he did. I mean, he just said, I want to answer that. And he
did. And well, he just said the government cannot work that way. That's anybody who thinks the government works that way, they don't understand how it operates. Like, that would be a campaign, and they can't do a campaign like that against American citizens. It's illegal. Like, and they brought up interesting points, and towards the end, the co-host who has Theory of Everything show, he did bring up, well, what about MK Ultra? And went on with that. And Jim said, that was back in, when was that exposed? 1960 something. He's like, I'm not saying we didn't make our mistakes, but the government has gotten better with how they do things. Like, I think people forget, that the United States really is a young country. Like, we don't have 500, 600, 700 years of bureaucracy that needs reorganized. We only have 200 plus years. So we're still amending and getting things correct. So, I mean, and you spoke to that, and we've talked about that before with these Cosmic Club players. What's their motivation for being, this involved? And I think seeing Jim speak the way he did in that interview, I think you could overlay that to a lot of these players that we talk about. They do have a genuine curiosity. It's not this nefarious secret holding, I'm in it for the power, like.
Although he did say at one point, he talked about the idea that anybody who thinks that the government just dropped this thing in 1969 is fooling themselves. I know I've been in government, and I know they'd be all over this thing. That in some deep dark program, they may not have gotten anywhere with it, but they definitely didn't ignore this problem.
Right. And that was a good moment too. And I liked at the end too, when he was expanding on this isn't Russian, this isn't China, this isn't ours. And he really kind of hit it home when he said, this happens everywhere. This happens in the United States. It happens in Canada. It happens in South America. He went on and listed places. And, that is important. I mean, this isn't an American issue. It's not just a military issue. That was the other thing too. Oh, I wanted to text Don Schmidt when I heard him talking about the Air Force. Like, all of just this report is just the Navy, so much done from the Navy. Where's the Air Force been? Why haven't we heard that? Like that was great to hear Semivan commenting on that. So
Yeah, he did volunteer some stuff. And it was personal stuff that he was upset about this.
mhm.
And I remember the one time he said, and we're not working for the government.
Yeah,
Remember he said that? And
yeah.
that was clear. He was like, and that's the whole deal. He's
We're not
retired.
working for the government. We're not a shill.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And he was he's sort of not angry, but he was
he was
pretty
direct.
straightforward in trying to make that point that I guess he's tired of people talking about that.
Mhm.
And because that's when they asked him the question, he said, I want to deal with that.
Well, and he said, they did that professional formality. They went to whoever they deemed they necessary. We are going to start working and focusing on this in the private sector. We'll keep you informed of what we do. We don't have to, but we will. And he said they didn't get any like pushback. Nobody was like, no, you can't.
Yeah.
So, and I think that was an important moment too, when they brought up that for the first time, they're able to openly discuss this in the halls of the Pentagon.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's true. I mean, that's what impressed me the most is when you listen to them talk, you're saying that's true, that's true, that's true. It's like it came across as very honest and
Yeah.
very the way they talked. There was at no time in the interview did I say, "Ah, come on, that's making up stuff." I never thought that once.
No, I got a little worried with like cattle mutilations being early in the interview. I was like, where's this going to go? Like, how speculative are they going to get? Like, and no, even to hear him speak, like cattle mutilations are happening. Like it's not, they didn't stop. There are thousands of them. And they did dive into a little bit of speculation, or that was really more Tom DeLonge. But then Semivan threw in his 2 cents later and said, yes, absolutely. Cattle mutilations are happening. It's associated with the phenomenon somehow. We don't really know, but seems like they're correlated. And that was a good moment too. And yeah, I think the one element that and I know this is just from like our pack of people we talk to and really pushing that experiencers are, a big part of this puzzle that gets overlooked. I really wanted Semivan to like throw in something about listening to experiencers,
Yeah.
I hope that would have been there, but maybe in the future, this is like the first time we've gotten this much publicly from him. So I hope we see more of that. Now that Lou is off on his own adventure, we kind of hoped that Semivan would step up and kind of be a face of TTSA. And I think this is the beginning of that.
Yeah. Let me read a little quote. I believe this is from Ron Pandolfi, and there's always the connection of what's the connection between Jim Semivan and Ron Pandolfi. But this is, I tracked this back, and this is, I believe, is the thinking of Ron Pandolfi. We can't track the phenomena, so we track the people correlated with the phenomena. The lights in the sky produce no usable information. On the other hand, there are many different types of contactees with many different insights, and maybe there are even visitors, however defined. So I asked Dan Smith, he's the one that produced that for me, and I said, would this be you, Dan, talking, or would this be intelligence? And he said, perhaps. So that sort of confirmed it. And that's the idea, is that's what I've always been maintaining, is that you've got to watch the people that are interacting with the phenomena. And if you don't go there, you're never going to figure it out, because they're the ones that are interacting with whatever this is that we're dealing with. So Jim is the experiencer. I know one person brought up today where they said, there was no, he didn't see it as a threat. And then people started asking about his experience. And of course, they wanted me to elaborate on his experience. And I won't go there, and neither will Melinda. I've heard the story of what happened and stuff like that. But I think the way he described it in the forward to Tom DeLonge's book is it shatters reality.
Mm-hmm.
Not that it was, this fearful thing where the aliens are going to eat him or whatever. It was just like it just shattered his reality of what he thought how the world worked. And so,
which is what most experiencers report. They're like it. Even Valet said it. What was his quote in your interview? He said, I knew that, this reality wasn't the only reality, and it, changed my life's pursuit. Like, it was
And I
something.
think,
Yeah.
didn't Semivan bring up Jacques Vallée in the interview? Didn't he say, I like what Jacques was
Yeah.
saying? Because
Yeah.
this is this aspect that people don't want to believe. They want to believe, and I've been down this road with people with this ET disclosure. They're when they're going to give us ET disclosure, and it's like, well, maybe they're not giving ET disclosure because not ET. And Jim keeps going there with this idea is we really don't know. This thing is beyond anything we can think about. That's why they call them the others. That's why Tom DeLonge, they always call it the others. They don't call them ETs. It's because they may have bodies, and he won't admit their bodies and pieces of crafts. But in terms of what is it, just because you have a body doesn't mean it's an ET. They've started to realize that this is so. I think Jim was trying to make that point. This is so far beyond what you can imagine that
Mhm.
it's not as simple as people think it is.
No, the others and the invisibles are the
Yeah.
two that I hear these upper echelon, how they refer to them. So,
Yeah, and the
but
ultra terrestrial thing where they've always been here, and even brought it up on Jimmy Church's show was the one that the guy from Politico, Brian Bender, talked about this Department of Defense study, and nobody's gone down that road. Everybody's looking at ASAP and ATIP, whatever. This is another program. I
Mhm.
believe it's the ones that went to Jim Peniston for his DNA and that sort of stuff. And according to Bender, they were looking at maybe it's here, but a different here. And that's this idea. It's all one thing. It's all here. It's reality, different realities, different vibrations. And you hear a lot of the beings talk about that. We've always been here, like the beings from England, when they told me, we've always been here.
Mhm.
You're the visitor. And it's this idea. And Jim goes there. And I like Jim because he does that. And I believe he's trying to get across a message. This may not be what you think it is. It is much more complex than people think it is.
Mhm. Well, and that's what, time will tell. And I liked that he also spoke with some confidence about like what he anticipates to come, because that was also dinging with me, like with the little things that Melinda would share. And it's like, oh, well, yep, that's exactly kind of what Semivan or Melinda said Semivan said. So it'll be interesting to watch this play out. I mean, if it was lottery numbers, I'd maybe pick those numbers.
Well,
That's
if you get the interview with Melinda for tomorrow or the next day, let's do the interview, get her take on it, and then I'm going to ask her the question: How did you feel getting the interview? You had 3 years to get an interview with this guy on tape, and
Yeah, I
somebody
think I
scooped you.
already know what she's gonna say though. It's like that friend level thing, because she's also told us like they were open, Jim was open to joining our panels, but we never did it the right way. We had to, go through the TTSA girl and send out an invite and coordinate it that way, which we never did. So we can't say that he won't talk and Melinda missed
Oh,
anything.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that part of the story.
You didn't?
No. So
Oh,
we were supposed to go to TTSA to get an interview with Jim Semivan. Is that what it was?
we've got the the lady we're supposed to contact who books any interview or anything that they do.
Oh, okay.
So we have her contact info. And I
Oh, we
didn't
do.
realize that didn't get sent to you. So my
Oh,
bad.
well, that's okay. No, I
You
mean,
take away my assistant gold star.
I thought Melinda had some pull. I mean, she has some pull in terms of talking to Jim, but it always it didn't really
Oh,
go anywhere with Melinda that I think a lot of people really just didn't believe
mhm.
and didn't take seriously because when this whole thing about it's not a threat, we heard that numerous times. The
Mhm.
fact that they were going to push for money in Congress, we heard that 3 years ago,
Yeah.
and it just never got. And then people would get it and they say, "Oh, look what they're doing," and it's like, "Oh, Melinda told us that 3 years ago," but nobody really listened to when we were putting it out through Melinda. And now I'm pretty sure everybody's going to be all over the Semivan interview, but he really didn't say anything different that I heard in
No,
terms of what he told Melinda. We've had all this stuff numerous times on our podcast.
I think I had somebody, they were trying to like share gossip or snidbits with me, and they're like, you just don't get excited about anything. I was like, I've heard this. I'm sorry. I've been talking about this for 3 months now. Like, and I don't mean that to be bad, but it's like, I don't know, when you kind of hear what is to come and then it does come out. Yeah, it does take away a little bit of the excitement, but
Was
I don't
there
know.
anything in the interview that surprised you that you saw new? I don't think there was really anything. The attitude, I think, was different, where I saw Tom DeLonge in a much better light in terms of not coming across as a crazy guy. But Jim was basically repeating significant things that I think he's been talking about for a long time, that people should, whether they're going to believe him or not. I mean, he's a guy that's at some sort of level where he would understand more than you and I.
I think it's I think we're seeing some chess pieces being moved around and maybe some new collaborations, because like I mentioned, Keating's involvement with the Galileo project now. So I think we're seeing some meetings of the minds kind of happen, and we are seeing Semivan step up, kind of, showing his face now. So maybe that will continue, like, to replace kind of how involved Lou was with talking about the TTSA. But it'll be interesting to see if that unfolds, like Tom said too, focus on the entertainment side, because that's what's established. And as we all come out of this COVID funk, it'll be interesting to see what they bring to the plate again. I think the speculation that they're tanking or they're done, and I don't know. I even went back and forth a little bit, like, is this the end? Like, are we going to see is this the beginning of their end, kind of thing? But nope, I've kind of gone the other way with my thinking now. Like, we're going to see a reboot almost. I think maybe they're refocusing their efforts on really what they want to do next. So it'll be good.
And it's just not what people want. People want, pictures of flying saucers and stuff, and they're going into the media stuff, which
That was nice hearing Semivan comment on that alone, just that the phenomenon almost doesn't want you to take its picture or place this, like,
if you go after it, then it disappears. Yeah.
right. Like, it was awesome hearing him comment like
And
that.
fits Skinwalker Ranch, and it fits the theory of wow. And it's where Bigelow said, when they asked Bigelow, what was it about? Well, all those years of Skinwalker Ranch, what was it about? Mm-hmm. He said, it's about messaging. It's about messaging and gaming. That's what it's about.
That was surprising too. Semivan had said that he has never met Mr. Bigelow.
Yeah.
That
which leads to a controversial thing we'll have to bring up with Melinda, mm-hmm. which kind of mystifies me, is, that that Danny Sheehan is legal counsel to Semivan, to Lou Elizondo and to Mellon, but he's never met Jim Semivan. And he has harsh things to say about, it's illegal. The counterintelligence stuff is all illegal. He's breaking the law, whatever. And it's kind of makes me wonder, why does Danny Sheehan not try to set up a meeting with Jim Semivan in terms of, especially when they're all together, right? Because they all work together, and he was dealing with Lou Elizondo before he left TTSA. And the way I look at Semivan is, he seems to be on Sheehan's wavelength. Like, he's not going to fight with Sheehan, that right. He may be able to answer Danny Sheehan's questions. So I'm kind of puzzled why Danny doesn't try to set up a meeting with
might just be stretched a little thin these days.
Well, he'd be spending a lot of time with Lou Elizondo, and if he wants to get to the bottom of it, I mean, instead of like talking about Semivan in a third person, I mean, just the way I look at Semivan is, when I hear from the Bledsoes and what I heard from the guy that originally told me who Semivan was, and what he was doing and stuff like that. And when you see him here, he looks like a really reasonable guy. he doesn't look like the evil CIA guy that
Yeah,
you would
like
think.
I
And
think
so,
I think I even thought I was like, oh, he looks so little and cute. Looking cute.
and he's not very tall. He's actually a very short guy. So when you see him,
Yeah, but
and
I mean, he looked like somebody you'd walk up to at a barbecue. You know what I mean?
yeah,
He didn't look nefarious or spooky or
and the weird 1960 furniture behind him. That's what I noticed. It was like, what? It's like his 1960s house furniture. It's like kind of weird.
love it. See,
So maybe,
everything that's old is new again. So
maybe we'll get Melinda to set up an interview or a session between Danny Sheehan and break the ice. Get these two together. I think that Danny Sheehan should be talking to Jim Semivan and clearing the air. And
that's the best part about our panel discussions too. It's like, have you noticed in almost every panel we host, somebody's like, oh, hey, you. And then they start messaging off to the side. And it's like, before we know it, like they've set up something and they're talking.
yeah,
And,
yeah,
I love bringing people together like that. So,
yeah. Well, set it up, but let's set up Melinda and see what her take is on it. And because she put the thing she put on Facebook was kind of mysterious, something like I would post, as if she had something she wanted to talk about and different opinions.
She's learning your tricks, but
The tricks, yeah.
another person I want to talk to you because I just finished reading their book was Alan. I want to talk to Alan Steinfeld. I know you do a lot of his stuff
Yeah.
and you guys have known each other, and I palled around with him at Laughlin for a while, and he gave me a copy of his book and I finally read it. So now I want to bring him on and talk about
Oh
all
yeah.
Alan.
He's easy. He's doing the interviews for his book. I'll do that. You set up the Melinda one.
I could do that too. Yeah, whenever with Alan. We've stayed in touch since then, but yeah, I haven't told him I finished the book. So
There you go. Yeah, he'll
now
be
that I
pretty.
know him, you're the same way. Now that I talk to you so much, anytime I read anything of yours, I hear your voice. And now Alan's the same way. It's like when I was reading his book, it's like Alan narrated it. So it was great.
Do I narrate very fast? Do I talk very fast if
I
I
slow
narrate?
you down. I do
I
slow
slow
you
you
down.
down. Yeah.
But no, that's perfect. I love that. I think every author needs to narrate their own books, or I
Yeah.
need to
Well,
listen to them so I can hear
yeah.
it. But
Okay, we'll leave it at that, and
yeah,
we'll go with the next one with Melinda, and we'll do some of these panels and
yeah.
play.
When we discuss the what's the name of Bledsoe Knows? Is that the name of the show? Like
Bledsoe says so.
Bledsoe says so. Yeah, like
So listen to that. We'll do on the weekend. We'll do one on that because what he talks about is the phenomena.
yeah.
What does he believe the phenomena is? And he mentions Tim Taylor. He actually starts using his name now. He doesn't call him Tyler D anymore. He calls him Tim Taylor. Talks about the Cosmic Club. He talks about Jim Semivan. So we'll have a discussion about that. And he describes Jim Semivan the same way I've heard Jim Semivan, that he's just a straight guy, had
Yeah.
an experience, very interested, not the evil CIA guy.
The which one did we just post? Or whichever discussion we just had a few days ago, I think the Bledsoes came up a little bit, and then that was actually a few of the comments as people were asking more about the Bledsoe story, and I directed them to the few interviews or panel, or not panels, but slideshows that you've done when you've been discussing Bledsoe's work. But maybe you could do an update on all of that. You never did like a full like segment of this is it, but it's been sprinkled into some others, I think, to where you
Yeah,
could.
I did the one where I had him flying the craft.
Mhm.
We have one where he joins a rabbit hole in Boulder, Colorado, a number of years ago.
Yeah.
And I thought Desta had it, but we're going to post that. And the other one is that most people don't know is I wrote the entire Bledsoe story in a book called Alien Bedtime Stories. I have the majority of the story, all the stories in there.
And that's
So
what
when I hear him talking about this stuff, I go, oh, that's in the book, that's in the book, that's in the book. And so
I
I
thought
think
it
I've
was.
got it pretty accurate.
I thought it was in that book, but I wasn't sure. So yeah, I'll go in and drop that into the comments for whoever was asking, because yeah,
Yeah.
that's where you can find most of your work on the Bledsoe, or most of your research with the
Yeah.
Bledsoes. So
And now the way they're describing him is, this top experience that everybody's paying attention, and they even bring up Trump and they bring up Biden. They
yeah.
talk about the fact that he's briefed to Biden, but I knew when I had the experience in 2013, he was the real deal,
Mhm.
and that's when I wrote up his
Well, and
story.
that was another thing you were kind of privy to. It was, you knew the Bledsoes were being approached from somebody in Hollywood about wanting to make a movie, and that was
Yeah,
Mr.
and
Abrams.
they also mentioned the thing with Tom DeLonge,
Mhm.
where he confirms it again that, and I was in a meeting with Tim Taylor and a guy by the name of Mark Olson and Mark Leon, big business guys, and they were advising Chris Bledsoe on the movie. That's when Warner Brothers was going to do the movie, and then that sort of fell apart because Chris wouldn't allow them to have they wouldn't allow Chris to have the control of the end of the movie, and he always wanted to be called the message, and it was the message that the woman, the lady in light had given him for the world, and the warnings and stuff like that. And then in this interview, you'll hear this phenomena part 4 of Bledsoe. They actually talk again about Tom DeLonge, and I heard that as well. That
Mhm.
Tom DeLonge offered like big money, huge. You would not even believe the money, production money. But they wanted to put reptilians in the movie at the end. They wanted to have this sort of a good aliens versus bad aliens. And Chris Bledsoe had walked away from it. And Ryan brings that up, and the fact that Chris has walked away from millions and millions and millions of dollars for principle, that they're not going to do it unless they're going to tell the true
That's
story.
what, you know, that's what's brought up so often among experiencers and Hollywood. It's like you, or just ufologists in Hollywood, like you don't have to exaggerate this stuff. Like you don't have to twist it around. It's interesting enough. Like,
Yeah.
don't mess with it.
But that's what they want in Hollywood, is they always want the adversarial, the duality, the good guys
Right.
versus the bad guys. The Americans win and the aliens are killed, and everybody lives happily ever after, and we sing God Bless America. But
No.
that's the kind of thing they want. They want it, when it's not adversarial, they don't sell as many tickets. It's like a cage match. You need a cage match going on.
Well,
That's
what
what they want to do to
best
Chris Bledsoe's
mystery
story.
ones, the suspenseful ones, like the intrigue, like those
Yeah.
are the ones that stand the test of time, not I don't know. That's my thoughts, but it'll be interesting to see what's coming up over the next few weeks. And I know everybody was on fire, and I was, about JJ Abrams UFO 4-part
Yeah.
thing, and we can maybe discuss that some other time too, after you watch it. You haven't watched it yet, so.
I don't have TV, so, but I've heard all the comments. People are not very happy about it.
I know.
Everybody seems to be, and Abrams was going to do Chris Bledsoe's story.
I
He was,
know, and that's why I'm kind of like, maybe Bledsoe dodged a bullet with that one. Like,
yeah, yeah.
and
Okay, we'll leave it at that, and let me know about the interview for once you've listened to Chris Bledsoe's or Ryan Bledsoe's podcast. We'll talk about that and
we'll
set
get
up something with Melinda for the next couple of days.
we'll get busy. Yep. Now that I'm
Okay,
out of the restaurant,
there you go. And
back in the interview chair, but it was great talking with you, Grant. We'll talk soon.
okay, wonderful. Thanks.
Bye.